swooning for some jazz?
Let Nothemba Madumo serve you up some jazz and beyond
on 702 and CapeTalk.
Jazz and beyond, and as always, this is where you come for the jazz. You stay for a good time, and I love the good time because I get to be in conversation with some of the my favorite people that I admire, whose work is absolutely incredible. And today I am so happy and actually very honored because a multi-award winning jazz artist who's also a journalist, singer-songwriter, producer, and also the founder of the award-winning Women in Jazz organization, who I think both of us just keep telling each other how much we love what we are doing. And there is just so much love and admiration between us. And this is Fiona Ross. Hello, Fiona.
Oh, hello. Thank you so much for having me. And what a wonderful introduction. But as you say, right back at you, I'm an incredible lover, supporter, inspired by all of the work that you do as well. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I mean, you are a jazz singer and you also wear all these other different hats. And my question is, did you even imagine as a young girl that you would be doing what you're doing today?
Oh, goodness, absolutely not. In fact, I was trained in the theatre. So from a very young age, I was doing dance, drama and music. So theatre was actually my initial direction. And I did a lot of kind of West End work and so on. And I started learning music. So I started learning the piano when I was 6. So music has always been literally part of my kind of very being from a very, very young age. But journalism and kind of a lot of the extra work definitely was never on my radar for anything to do at all. And I've been very fortunate, the opportunities I've been given, and my journalism, to be honest, that quite simply started when a publication that I now write for reached out to me and said they were looking for musicians to start reviewing, that they didn't want a kind of formal, trained, academic type of journalist. They were really looking for a musician's take on other musicians. And I kind of said, well, I've not done that before, but I'll give it a go. And then fast forward a few years, here I am doing what I do. So no, I didn't envisage this at all, but I'm so grateful.
But I like that approach where, you know, asking musicians to review the work of other musicians, where now you are not counting your words and making sure that everything fits. As, you know, when one is trained in journalism, remember, you had to do it this way. And here, this is you just expressing Fiona in her most honest way about whatever she believes she's hearing or seeing out of the musician.
And you know what's really important for me in my own music work, but very importantly, when I'm speaking about others, is authenticity.
Yeah.
And kind of, you know, providing a space for people's voices, whatever it is they want to say. So I think with my journalism, and that's always been my approach, it's very much about them. What's their story? You know, what needs to be said? What do people need to hear? So yeah, I work very hard to make sure that it's all about giving them a platform, and I'm grateful that I have one to be able to shout about all these incredible artists. And I say, I know you feel the same, that you've got this wonderful platform, and it's kind of an honor, isn't it, in many ways, to be able to shout about so many incredible people.
Absolutely. And I think for you as a musician as well, you also have a perspective that is sensitive to what life of a musician is like. For you to be able to then express your thoughts and your opinions and your views really about what other musicians are going through or what they're doing and how their work comes to fruition, because you know the process, the challenges and the successes that go behind all that.
Oh yes, and I have to say, I always, if I'm interviewed as with my musician hat on,
Mm.
there's kind of certain questions that always come up, and I know which questions I love answering, and I know which questions are more of a challenge or kind of, not hugely interesting. So whenever I'm interviewing other musicians, I very much got my musician hat on, but balanced with, I want to engage the audience.
Yeah.
If there's an incredible artist that I want to shout about, I need to balance that. What does the musician want to say, but what do we need to hear to get that audience engaged? And it was interesting. I interviewed, I think it was last year, one of my biggest inspirations as a musician is Hiromi, this incredible pianist and composer. I'm obsessed with her. She's incredible. And I've been following her work for quite a few years. And I had the opportunity to interview her last year. And a friend of mine always said, "Oh, you shouldn't interview your heroes." She always said, "Oh, you don't do that." And I've luckily done it a few times, and it's been wonderful. But to start with, the interview I felt wasn't going hugely well. It took me, I was like, oh gosh, we were talking and she was, answering the questions, but I didn't feel it flowing. And then she said to me, "You know what? I hate being interviewed." And I was like, "Oh, I'm really sorry." And she said, "But you know what I love doing is talking to my fans." She said, "I love talking to my fans." And I said, "Well, I'm a fan."
Yeah.
So I flipped the interview rather than me as journalist hat. I flipped it and I'm like, "I love your music." And then it flowed, and then it was like a different relationship. So yeah, it's really important to me to kind of just, however you do it, find that space so that whoever you're interviewing can say what they need to say and enjoy it.
We'll come back to that, because that also extends to other things, your journalism hat. But I just want to come back to Fiona Ross, the musician, the jazz musician, the composer, the storyteller, and also the jazz storyteller. When did you realize that jazz, as much as, like you say, you grew up in theater and all that, but then what pulled you to the jazz side of music?
But I think there's a few things to explore there. My father, so growing up, although I was theatre trained in many ways, as a pianist, I was classically trained, but my father was very much into traditional jazz. So I grew up in a household of kind of Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra, Nina Simone. He was very much an all big band, Armstrong. So I grew up with that influence, and my mother was into opera, actually. And I grew up very much with kind of a lot of early jazz in my mind. And I remember when I was, I think I was about 12, and I started learning Oscar Peterson. And I don't know how I found Oscar Peterson, but I remember being obsessed with his Night Train album and wishing my hands were bigger.
He used to be my dad's favorite pianist, actually.
He was my first kind of jazz piano love. And I remember just wishing, and I bought all of his transcriptions. Well, it was bought for me. And I remember spending hours practicing his transcriptions, just wishing my hands were bigger. And as I say, this is when I was like, I don't know, 9, 10, 11. So I was already kind of very much obsessed with Oscar Peterson, but as a singer, I'd only really heard Ella. She was the one in my head. And I remember someone saying to me, "Look, if you want to understand jazz, you need to listen to Billie Holiday." And in my very, very young, naive ignorance, I was like, Billie Holiday, I've never heard of her. But I took my training very seriously. So I found a greatest hits of Billie Holiday cassette. And I started listening to this. And because at that age in my head, it was all about training. And of course, I was classically trained in many elements. So to hear Billie Holiday's voice, which is so very different to Ella, for example, I couldn't quite get my head around it. I was like, I didn't get it. I was like, I don't understand. Like, why is this person said, "Oh, Billie Holiday, Billie Holiday"? And as I said, please bear in mind, I was like 11 or 12, I think. And until I heard "Strange Fruit." And the minute, and I think it was like track 11 or 12 on this Greatest Hits album. And I remember listening to this over and over again, being overwhelmed but confused at that time. I was like, what is she singing about? This I don't understand. And then I went and did some research, and that kind of started me on my passion for equality and studying the civil rights movement in America. But she taught me that music is where you put your pain. And I think that was where the jazz element really took growth as a place for not just freedom, but possibilities. And I think fast forward many years when I started writing my own material, which is really only, I think, 6-7 years ago is when I started my world as a contemporary jazz artist. Jazz was just the place where whatever I wanted to do, I felt was possible. So yeah, that's that. I think that's kind of the relationship I have with jazz to a large extent.
And also because jazz gives you the freedom to whatever is whatever it is that you want to say, you can say it in whatever way you want to say it. And I like that, because what you've just said is so reflected in the titles of your songs, and even just your even just your albums. I'm just trying to list them out for any of our listeners who have not heard of Fiona Ross yet. I don't know why, but here you are.
Not too kind.
Your latest is we'll come to more details on Moments in My Notebook. You've got thoughts, conversations, and the to-do lists, which I love, because you even turn that into the title of your podcasts, where you are interviewing other musicians. Then you've got 7 songs in 7 days. I mean, already one is imagining the story and the experiences behind, these kind of titles. Then you have Red Flags and High Heels. I'm like, and then you have Fierce and Non-Compliant, Black, White, and a little bit of gray. You got Just Me and Sometimes Someone Else. And of course, A Twist of Blue, which was, I think, your first one as well. So what inspires these kind of titles? And especially because, and as you say, with your songwriting skills and excellence, which has come through in your music, why do you say you decide, listen, that's what I thought at the time, and that's what it's going to be?
Yeah, do you know what? And I quite often get asked about kind of my songwriting process, and I'm sure people think I'm a lot more planned than I actually am. I always say I just go with the flow, but it's very, very true. What I tend to do is I decide, I think it's time for me to start thinking about my next album, and then I will just start writing whatever comes out. And I literally just go with the flow. And then at the end of writing, once I've written most of the songs, I kind of tend to think, I've got, 10, 11, however many songs seems like an album's worth. And I kind of reflect back and then think about the kind of the shape of the work that I've done. And then a title just comes into play. It just appears. I don't. The only time I haven't done it that way was Fierce and Non-Compliant. And this was. I used to be on Twitter, now known as X. I'm not anymore. But when I was on there, I found this meme that said "Fierce and Non-Compliant." And I loved that phrase. I was just like, I love this, Fierce and Non-Compliant. And then someone replied to this tweet and said, that's a really good album title. And I was like, yes, it is. Do you know what? My next album, I'm going to call it Fierce and Non-Compliant.
Wow.
So with that album, that was inspired by a quote that I posted and someone just say, that would be a good album title. So that one, I very much started with that, because that, and this is why I loved it, because there's loads of photos of me, and in fact the album cover for that is a photo my mum took when I was, I don't know, I think I was maybe 4 or 5, looking really stroppy and arrogant and kind of, you know, a diva, and I'm just in this kind of like this pose. And also in a lot of my reviews at that time, and that was my fourth album, I think, a lot of my reviews were talking about, saying very kindly that I was fierce, and that was mentioned, but also that I don't, and I'm very happy to say, fit in any boxes.
Yeah.
You know, because my music, some of it you go, this is definitely jazz. Some of it you go, oh, it's more singer-songwriter. And then some would say, well, it's kind of contemporary jazz. So I kind of cover a whole range of different vibes and feels.
In fact, I was
non-compliant.
I was going to ask how you describe your kind of jazz, because as much as it is rooted in traditional jazz, it just branches off in all sorts of directions.
I know, and sure, it's actually quite hard because I mean, I think I sit under contemporary jazz, whatever, you know. I mean, if we have to, and it's funny, I was talking to someone the other day about you know, how none of us want to fit into a box, but sometimes you kind of need to align with the box, you know, just when it comes to things like marketing. So even simple things like radio stations and like playlists and so on, you know, there are, like yours, there are jazz radio stations, you know, there are, you know, singer-songwriter and so on. So sometimes there's a need to try and kind of work out, do you align with the box? And I think I think I sit under contemporary jazz, but there's some of my music is very definitely jazz, very definitely. Yeah. And I have thought about actually pulling out of my album some of the songs that you would absolutely define as, these will keep my jazz fans happy. This is proper jazz. And then I could also pull out stuff that you would say is contemporary jazz, in that it's kind of slightly more Latin, or kind of, you know, it's got a bit more groove to it. But then you could also pull out some songs that you could say are more singer-songwriter and more jazz influenced than jazz. But I think it's just, you know, I've had such a beautifully diverse musical upbringing. So when I write, I just write what's in my head. And the only time I haven't done that is and it was my Black, White and a Little Bit of Grey album. I have such long album titles. But with that album, I'd had, as I say, quite a few reviews and you could see people were kind of like, well, where does she sit? Which box does she sit in? And someone had said, oh, I'm not sure this is jazz. Not in a negative way, and I thought, right, you want a jazz song? I'm going to write a jazz song. And so I started. So the song on that album called Busy, Always Busy. I just started it with a bass line. I'm like, right, okay, I'm going to have like a very clear jazz bass line right from the beginning. So as soon as you start this track, you know it's jazz. But then at the end of it, I couldn't help it. At the end of it, I move into a slightly kind of, you know, different direction. But yeah, honestly, I just write whatever's in my head. And sometimes that's very, you know, more traditional jazz, and sometimes it's really not. So I never plan it. I really do just go with whatever's in my head at the time.
Yeah, but I like the fact that you know, you and a lot of other musicians feel, listen, I'm gonna do it my way. And I hope you just appreciate and love what I am doing, rather than fitting into the box, as you were saying earlier on. Let's talk about Moments in My Notebook, which is your latest release that you did released this year, and I've played some track out of that album. Which
I know, thank you so much.
Which I enjoy, and these are notes. This is a notebook that. Tell us the story. Let me not pretend I know.
Well, my writing, and although as I say, I am a classically trained musician, so I kind of, you know, I read music and so on. But when it comes to my writing, I love the space to just, as I say, go with what's in my head. So when I start writing songs, I write in my notebook. So, I have literally just it's just a blank kind of A4 notebook. So there's no manuscript, no kind of music paper on there, or it's literally just blank pages. And when I sit down and decide, right, I need to start writing my next album, I always go to a notebook. And that's where I kind of write my songs, really. And they start in different ways. And sometimes it could be a bass line, as I say, with my Busy Always Busy track, for example. Sometimes it's a bass line. Sometimes it's a groove. Sometimes it might be a lyric. So, and again, there's no fixed pattern. They come from different ways. Sometimes I sit and write an entire song all in one go. But I always put it in my notebooks. So I've got all these notebooks. And to be honest, they only really make sense to me because I kind of just, it's kind of just little notes while I'm writing. So it's not me writing out all the chord structures or kind of, anything like that. It's really just bits. Okay. And then once the song is complete, then I kind of score it out, if you like. So I write out the chords and kind of, do it so it's a proper structure so I can give it to my musicians to play. But yeah, so I write it in my notebooks. And with this album, because it takes me to 100 songs. And I was kind of reflecting on, the significance of that and what that really meant. I just thought, well, actually 100 songs, all of my 100 songs are literally kind of moments in my life that I've actually put in my notebooks that's turned into a song.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where that comes from.
And 100 songs and a lot of awards, not only as a musician, but also even for your writing work, but even in fact, you were saying that you, a couple of days ago, you're celebrating 5 years of Women in the Media organization that you started. Let's talk about that as to why you even, clearly influenced by your journalism work, you also, and you being a woman, this is me now explaining to myself. You then decided you're going to start this Women in Jazz Media organization. What happened, or what other experiences, or what did you witness that you thought, listen, there is this gap, this emptiness that needs to be filled with this kind of work?
Well, to be honest, it was really quite simple in many respects, and it was during the COVID lockdown, and I was it was one day, and I was looking at this jazz publication, which I won't name, but normally when you look at jazz publications, online or print, there's never many women, and I'd always been aware of that. And the publication I worked for, there was only one other woman who then left. So I'd always been aware that there was kind of, it felt like there wasn't many of us out there. And on this particular day, I was looking at this publication, and they actually had information on the writers. And I was like, oh, this is wonderful. They're actually, you could click on a link and there was a whole page with photos of all the writers. And I was like, oh, this is glorious. I haven't had to search to find the writers. But then the minute I was excited that there was a page where I could actually find information about all the journalists, and there were 52. As I was scrolling through all these pictures, I very quickly realized that they were all men. And I was like, oh, there's a woman, and there was 2 women.
Wow.
And the thing is, I think, although I'd always been aware of that, to see it visually in that way just really got to me. And I was just like, do you know what? I've had enough. I've just had enough of there not being women being platformed. Like, where are the other female journalists? So at the time, it was very specifically about journalists. And I thought, do you know what? I'm just going to start a Facebook page. And as I say, I do go with the flow with everything that I do and the ideas that come into my head. So I thought, I'm just going to start a Facebook page. And I was just thinking, well, what can I call this page? And I thought women in jazz, there's a lot of fabulous organizations and different things that are called women in jazz.
Mm.
And I thought women in jazz journalism was a bit J. There's too many J's in there. And I thought, okay, well, media, journalism comes under media.
Mm.
I'm just going to call it women in jazz media. And I started this Facebook page. And the initial idea was really just for me to kind of reach out, where are the other women out there? But then very quickly, I was getting messages from journalists, women across the world, talking about their issues, saying, thank goodness I've been looking for something like this. I feel completely on my own. And then I realized, okay, I think a Facebook page is not quite enough. I'm going to need to do something more. And if we're looking at media, that also includes photography.
Sure.
That includes producing, encompassing everything. So it very quickly, and I do mean very quickly, escalated into me kind of, talking to some women about forming a team and starting some initiatives. So that's how it started.
And that's how I found you. Incidentally, because I just saw that title definitely refers and connects with me and what I do, and just finding out the incredible work that you've done. Not only have you then interviewed a whole lot of women in this space, including our very own photographer out in East London, in the Eastern Cape. And you've also interviewed a musician from Cape Town. You and me as well. Thank you for that.
Yes, you're coming up in the next magazine. I'm very excited about
lovely,
that.
lovely. Because then it also then, as you say, expanded to the whole world now, and gives every one of us in this space access to a lot of people that we may not know who are in this space, not only as women in the media, but also the women jazz musicians and artists who are needing the acknowledgement and also the exposure to the rest of the world.
And I have to say, this is a wonderful challenge, but one of the biggest challenges, because when I first started it, I didn't think about location. And in fact, the very first message I got on the Facebook page was from a journalist in China. And then the next one was from someone in Spain.
Wow.
So it was I hadn't given any thought to location until these women reached out. And I thought, well, I don't know anything about the jazz scene in China. And then I don't really know anything about the jazz scene in Spain either. So very quickly I was like, okay, because the thing is, we are all in this together.
Yeah.
And whether that's by country, by type of jazz, or our role, we all need each other. So, as a musician, you need a venue. You need someone to hopefully play your music, a radio station. You need a photographer. We are literally all in this together. And I always long for that community feel and the understanding that we do all need each other. So for me, it's really important that we share everyone equally, whilst also balancing that with what we don't often see. So, for example, and look, I'm a vocalist, so this is no disservice to vocalists. But if you look across the world, female singers, you will see are platformed far more than, let's say, female trombonists.
Yes.
Or female photographers. So a big part of the work is, because the dream is that we don't have to talk about any of this. The dream is everybody is platformed and everyone.
Yeah.
But until we're there, a lot of our focus with Women in Jazz Media is what do you not normally see? And what I love doing, and as I'm currently in the process now with our magazines, when it looks to the front cover, I'm like, well, what do you not normally see on the front cover of a jazz magazine? What have I never seen before? And I love, it comes from a negative place in some ways, but I love being able to go, do you know what? I have never seen a kind of, I don't know, black guitarist who's in her 80s. I've never seen that on a cover, right? So I love thinking, what do I want to see? What does the world need to see that we don't normally see? So that's what's really important to me.
Because a lot of it goes a long way in then for the young ones who are coming up to know what is possible, and that you you also don't have to look a certain way or be a certain way to get the kind of exposure. Like you make the example you're making, an 80-year-old guitarist, on the front cover is for any young person today. I can do this for the rest of my life. It doesn't mean my life stops when I get to my 40s and I'm ditched or somebody, then everyone looks to the younger ones. But share some of the incredible, moments, or maybe even that have reflected a tangible change in the organization that you've created. Women in Jazz Media.
Oh gosh. Well, it's funny because as you kindly pointed out, it was our 5-year anniversary on Friday, just a couple of days ago. And part of what I do each year is I just literally do like a document of highlights of what we've achieved in 5 years, just so I can put it on the website so that people can just have a quick overview. And oh my goodness, what a list. And this is not coming from arrogance at all. It's because it's not just me. It's like we have a fantastic team of women, but just kind of looking through and listing what we've done. And looking back, I don't quite know how we've done that. But I think a few things when we talk about changing the landscape, and as I say, and I quite often have to say this is not about female domination. The dream is that actually we don't need to exist, that we don't have to talk about gender or anything else.
We shouldn't be forming these kind of organizations and platforms. They shouldn't be there, and they are there so that they can disappear.
Yes,
eventually.
So that's the dream. And quite often people say, what's your goal? And I think they expect me to go, well, we want to take over the world. And it's like, absolutely not. The dream is that I don't need to do this at all. But we're not obviously there yet. So things like our magazines are now in the British Library. Yeah. And for me, that's significant because that means forever in history will be these women. So it's not even about our magazines or us. It's about what's in the magazines. So yourself, for example, you will be in the British Library.
Hello.
So I think that I know, right?
Hello.
So for me, the British Library, which is obviously very significant, but we're talking about history. We're talking about the history books, and this is where historically women have not been. Yep. So I think things like that are significant. I think the amount of articles we've written and the stories that we've shared are significant. And again, it's that focus on photographers. So we recently held, and again, this is something I'm very passionate about. I mean, I'm not a photographer. I mean, I love photography, but I'm not a photographer, but I spend an awful lot of time with photographers. And we held an exhibition. And this is a really beautiful example of how, just come up with an idea and then it beautifully kind of flies into this other area. And basically, to cut a very long story short, of the jazz clubs, and I'm based in London, of the jazz clubs in London, and there's not that many of them, some of them have some stunning photos on the wall, really stunning, gives it that kind of jazz club feel, black and white kind of photography, gorgeous, and it does add to the vibe. But most of them do not have, firstly, the credits of the photos. So you've got these photos, but it doesn't tell you who took them. But importantly, there are barely any women. In fact, and I won't name because I'm not a name and shame, but there's several well-known clubs in London that don't have any female photographers on the wall at all.
Wow.
And on a particular day, I just had enough. I was just like, you know what? I just need to see women on the walls.
Yeah.
And I happened to be at one of the venues that we work with, and I walked in and Preeti, the manager, she said, "You all right?" And I said, "No, do you know what? I just need to see some women on the walls." And we basically kind of thought, I looked around, I'm like, can we put some women on your walls? And then she said, let me talk to our venue owner. And he does art exhibitions. And this basically escalated into a photography exhibition.
Wow.
So,
beautiful.
Her voice, her sound, which is actually, and we have 5 different photographers, one of which is from, Vuya Gibba.
Oh, Vuya Gibba, that's, yes. That's who you
she's one of the, yes. She's one of the photographers. So it started off, and that was in London for 3 months. So literally, and I say I did do some research. So I don't want to absolutely be adamant, but I cannot find any other time at all, according to the internet, of where this has happened before. Of having a female photography exhibition, jazz photography.
Kudos to you, girl.
At all.
Kudos to you.
Yeah. So
well done.
I can't find evidence. And now we're going on tour. So we did it in London.
Fantastic.
And now next year we're going to go on tour, and hopefully we'll come over to you. That's something we had a brief chat about, but that's on my list. So I think things like that are significant.
Lovely. Fantastic. Who have been your favorite women to interview?
Oh,
no, for the articles and even maybe for your podcasts, because I've seen some incredible women on your podcast. I mean, a favorite that we share is China Moses, and I told her I was going to be speaking to you as well, and she was just as happy. And you've had some incredible musicians and singer-songwriters. I mean, the conversations that you have, I love those conversations that you have with the women as well.
Oh, thank you. I've been honestly, and I say this all, I'm so grateful, and I genuinely don't know how these things happen, because it is really such an honor to be able to speak to so many incredible women. And China Moses, and if she's listening, she'll laugh at this. It's a healthy obsession, like almost every day like she makes my day better. Just scrolling through Instagram, and what I love about China, I mean, it's the honesty. Like, she's amazing. Like, from her, as a performer, as a woman, as someone who fights for the community, and I just love, her, everything about her. And I can just look at a picture of her scrolling on Instagram, and just that kind of goes, you know what, okay, yeah, I can do this, or I can get on with my day, or even just, you know what, I've got the same issue. So I love speaking to those women who inspire, but also somehow manage to bring you into that kind of, look, you're not alone. We have this commonality. So China, and I think two of our patrons actually are again my heroes. So Maxine Gordon and Tamika Noddle. And oh my goodness, I mean, these are women that are forever in my heart, mind, and soul. And I have learned so much from them.
You follow her every time she goes to France. You're there.
Oh, well, Maxine, and this was, and in fact, this was, honestly, and I think, and again, this is an example of how things seem to happen in my life. Was that, and this was quite early in my journalism career, and I knew nothing about her at all, and I saw that Dexter Gordon's wife was writing a new book about Dexter, and I thought, oh, that looks interesting. I'll see if I can interview her. Quite complete ignorance, and I managed to kind of get hold of her, and she said, oh yes, I would, and I'd not met her before. She said, yes, I'd love to, but I'm in Paris. And I was like, I'll come to Paris then. So I went to Paris, and this basically was, life-changing for me, because we sat in this gorgeous cafe for hours and hours talking about everything. Yeah. And then she also said to me that with this new book, she had decided that she only wanted to be interviewed by, she's based in New York normally, she only wanted to be interviewed by women or African Americans. And she only wanted to sell her book in independent bookstores.
Wow.
And just that statement for me was like, wow, yeah, you could do that. Like, people can do that. You can make those choices to go, do you know what? I don't want to play this game. This is how I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And she goes to Paris. And in fact, part of that is because she adores James Baldwin. And so she goes, she spends about 3 months in Paris every year. And of course, Paris is a little bit easier for me to get to than New York.
Yes, absolutely. She's an amazing woman. She's an amazing woman. And you're right. When you talk to her, you can sit there for hours. I met her twice in the Netherlands, though.
You know.
Yes, exactly. What are you curious about as a musician right now?
Ooh, what a wonderful question. What am I curious about? Oh, I don't know. I think as a musician, I'm always, because I don't plan anything really, I'm always interested to see where my musical head goes to. So my next writing, and I've already started thinking about my next album. I have started my next album, but I'm always curious as to where my musical head will take me.
Yeah.
But I think also the industry, and what I find particularly, well, it is a challenge, but a kind of nice challenge in some ways, because I don't fit neatly into a box. I love exploring new audiences. So next year, for example, I'm playing outside of London, which I haven't done an awful lot of. So I'm going to kind of Wales, I'm going to Ireland, different areas. And for me, that it kind of means I'm exploring new people, new audiences. So for me, it's kind of like, are you connecting with my music? And I certainly hope so. But then it's those conversations. It's like, what is it about my music that does something for you? And then trying to really reflect on that. And hope that it kind of instills in me so that any new music I write is something that people would like and need, I guess.
Wow. Well, we look forward to all that exploring that you are planning to do. What has been the common thread in the work that you've done where women are concerned? The common thread in either the challenges or either the improvement and successes that you've witnessed?
Sure, I think it comes down to being heard. I think it comes down to women not feeling that they're heard and not having that space to be heard. And then with the Women in Jazz Media and the work the whole team does and the work that I do is being very grateful to have a platform to allow, allow seems the wrong word, but to give, women a place that their voices can be heard. And whether that's in an interview in our magazine, whether that's a gig opportunity, like a performance opportunity, whether that's an interview on a podcast, whatever it is, I think it's about, having a space to be heard, but also to be heard truthfully.
Yeah.
Like, what is your story? Who are you? What do you want people to know? And I think that is the really the heart of everything that we do is that I want everyone to have a safe space. Yeah. And not just safe, a space that is valued, that's respected, but also wanted. And I think that's the thing. It's not just about having a space. It's like, people wanting, gosh, we want to hear more about this person. Right. So, yeah, I think that's at the heart of everything I do, to be honest.
And have you, as we wrap up, have you found that a lot of women are expressing the fact that they are finding themselves being more free to be authentic rather than fitting into certain societal expectations?
Well, yes and no. I think yes, but there's also still a big problem with that. And that would be a whole other conversation about the industry. But I think that's still a challenge. But I do think, and again, would be another conversation. But I think with the rise of AI, in particular, and all the fake out there, that actually does give rise more to real. So whilst there's so much fake, authenticity and what's actually real, I think is going to actually become more of a thing. And that sounds like a weird thing to say, but I know even me with my last album, almost every review I got, and they were wonderful, almost everyone referred to my authenticity. And for me, I'm like, well, of course, it's just me. Of course, I'm authentic. But it suddenly occurred to me that where we're talking about AI generated music and kind of, fake images and so on, actually, I think people are going to want more authenticity, which is a wonderful thing.
Which is fantastic. Look, I know we could talk for hours on end. As we did last time, but yes. I just want to thank you and wish you all the best and congratulate you on all the work you do, not only as a musician but also as activist for, women in jazz media. And thank goodness that platforms like yours exist in the many forms that it does, because then everybody gets to know we exist all over the world in different forms, shapes, colors, and modes and characters and so forth. And thank you so much for all the work you do, and may it grow even bigger. In fact, how do you want to plan to grow it?
Oh, I don't know. And I think that's the thing with my last album being 100 songs, for example. It's like, well, does that mean I do another 100? It's like, I don't, honestly, when I say I go with the flow, I just take each day as it comes. I work as hard as I can. I help as much as I can, and take each day as it comes. And I will just keep doing that until I can't, I guess.
Okay. Maybe my last question. Have you read all those books behind you there?
Oh, yes, I have. And in fact, what you can't see is on this side is that I have this, basically this whole room this is my music / kind of working room. So there's books everywhere. I love reading, actually.
Fantastic. Yes. And when do you get time
to
read?
So yes, I read an awful lot.
When do you read? Well, at night, or when you're not playing, when you're not gigging, when traveling?
When I'm traveling. So if ever I've got to get a train or a plane. And in fact, sometimes, I mean, if there's somewhere where I could drive, I will look at, could I go by train? Because then I can read. Wow. So yeah, travel time, and also before I go to bed. Yes.
Fantastic. Keep reading, keep composing, keep doing all the work you do. Fiona Ross, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. Thank you so much for all that you do. And I love your show. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Well, that's Fiona Ross, the multi-awarding musician, composer, author, journalist, and activist for women in jazz and women in the media as well.
Come for the jazz and stay for the good times.
On Jazz and Beyond with Nothemba Madumo.
On 702 and CapeTalk.